He gets upset about his best friend getting married and is like, well, I'm out of here. I've just been dead, so whatever, it's fine. Rambo, though, to their credit, did end up planting flowers all over Tommy's dirt house, and it is really beautiful from an aesthetic point of view, but I believe when Tommy comes back to his house, he sees it and feels dead all over again, and like this is a memorial for him, so generally he's just not doing well. He does go to the Big Inn Hotel and come across Jack Manifold, who is surprised and angry to see that Tommy is alive after he's done all of this character development. How could Tommy just be alive all of a sudden? Jack basically tries to have an honest conversation with Tommy and tell him that, hey, I've been wanting to kill you for the past month or so, and Tommy, of course, does not want to have this conversation right now because he has just been dead. And Jack Manifold gets even more angry because Tommy can't just have a conversation with him, and now he hates Tommy even more and probably is like, you know what, you should have stayed dead, but he doesn't say that out loud. Tommy once again is following familiar patterns and has made it his goal to once again kill Dream because he is certain that if Dream escapes and or uses the revive book to bring Wilbur back to life, then he will destroy everything that everyone loves. So Tommy is kind of walking around grumbling to himself, trying to figure out his next plan of attack, when he comes across Quackity, who takes one look at him and says, hey man, it's pretty fucked up to dress as a dead guy. And Tommy's like, what are you talking about? And Quackity's like, that's messed up, man. You know, he was a friend of mine and he just died like a week ago, so you could be like, you could be a little sensitive and have some respect. And Tommy is like, Quackity, it's me. I'm alive. It's me, Tommy, in it. And Quackity's like, oh my god, good to see you, man. Guess what? I've been up to some crazy stuff. I'm starting a country, did you hear? And Tommy's like, I was dead for 2 months. Bye. So now that Tommy has come back to life, we can get to a little bit of Quackity lore. So Quackity is starting this new country, Las Nevadas, and Quackity has this big first stream for it that is an actual like cinematic production. Quackity, the actual guy, has like insane streams in this era, and he really kicked up the production quality. It's kind of beautiful in some ways. But anyways, Quackity ends up meeting with Schlatt's ghost, otherwise known as Glatt. He says his own name like that, like a Pokemon, and he meets with Schlatt's ghost in an underground cave, which has been transformed into a gym. And Glatt basically stays there pumping iron all day. He has pictures up of his dad, and he invites Quackity down there and immediately starts calling him Flatty Patty again, saying like, oh, you have a flat ass, and Quackity is getting upset again. And generally, it is a bad reunion between the two. Glatt says that he's been trapped in this underground cave for some time and needs Quackity's help to get out of here. And noticeably, Ghostbur is kind of the better parts of Wilbur that weren't present when he died, and Glatt, similarly, is kind of the better parts of Schlatt that weren't there when he died. So Glatt actually pumps iron, works out, and is talking with Quackity still in like a demeaning sort of tone, but their conversation makes much more progress than it did in Schlatt's final days, where he was belligerent and drunk and wouldn't listen to anyone unless they were bringing him a protein shake. So that's just a little interesting thing about ghosts on the Dream SMP. But anyways, Quackity and Glatt end up making a deal that might involve some resurrection, because Quackity has heard about this revival book, and Quackity says, you know what, Glatt, I will resurrect you, but you're gonna have to be on my side. You're gonna have to do some things for me. And Glatt basically agrees, and Quackity decides that he, having heard about the revival book from Tommy, needs to go and get the secrets of the resurrection book from Dream. So Quackity goes to the prison and convinces Sam that he should be let in every day to see Dream, and so he goes in, he persuades Sam, and after he goes in, he pulls up with a full inventory full of torture devices, like shears and stuff. It's implied that he's going to like pull Dream's teeth, and it's basically like, hey Dream, how's it going, man? I am going to torture you until you tell me how to revive people. I'm going to come back here every day, and you are going to tell me how to revive people, and until you do that, I'm just going to torture you. And Dream is losing his mind, because he is unfortunately still alive and can feel pain, and so Quackity is threatening to come by and torture him every day, but he is not threatened enough to give away the revival secrets, not just yet, thus necessitating the torture. Quackity also ends up meeting with Foolish, and we hear some more lore about how Foolish used to be a war god. Quackity's basically using it to blackmail him, and then Quackity drops a bomb about the Red Banquet where he says that he let Foolish die, and Foolish is flabbergasted, and Quackity's basically explaining that it was all part of his plan for Las Nevadas and everything, and Foolish goes, "You let me die for a sales pitch?" Which, like, honestly, that's real of him. That's really real. Quackity also ends up recruiting Fundy and Purpled, who is not on here, but he does recruit them to his nation, or basically heavily encourages them to join. And he also gets to meet everyone's favorite boy, Slimecicle. I'm pretty sure he doesn't look like this in canon, but he shows up in a restaurant that Quackity is breaking into. By the way, this is where it's made canon that Quackity does have wings, which is a very popular fanon design for him. I talked more about that in the first interlude. This is where it happens. He breaks into this restaurant, gliding in on Elytra, and he meets Slime, and instantly he's like, oh my god, I have to kill this guy because he's just seen me do something incredibly illegal. So he takes Slime out into the tundra and is like, hey buddy, I have to kill you. And Slime is very obviously not human. He's a slime and doesn't kind of understand the gravity of his situation and keeps asking Quackity if he'll dap him up, and Quackity kind of refuses, obviously, because he's like, I have to kill you. But then, gradually, Quackity starts to realize that he's kind of non-threatening and is actually a little bit of a jokester, alright? He kind of likes this guy. And so, eventually, he decides that he is going to keep Slime around, and the two of them team up, and he asks Slime if he would like to be a spy. And Slime is like, what is that? And Quackity is like, well, do you know what a friend is? And Slime is like, no, what's that? So they're a very cute duo. I like them a lot. Meanwhile, if you'll remember, Quackity, Sapnap, and Carl are all engaged to each other. They're the fiancés, and Carl has been off doing some time traveling because he's a time traveler, which is awesome. I'll cover his storyline in one of the interludes, I'm sure, but Carl, because of his time traveling, is losing all of his memories, and so Sapnap recruits him and George to join Kinoko Kingdom, this new country that they're starting out in the mushroom biome, and Carl was supposed to invite Quackity to join, but because of his memory loss, he forgot, and he doesn't even remember who Quackity is, which is heartbreaking. But then Quackity shows up eventually and is like, hey, I thought we were polycool, so why are just the two of you starting a country without me? And Carl can't explain who this guy is. He doesn't know who he is. All he remembers is that Quackity let him die in an explosion. Remember when, during Mexican Lemberg, they faked that explosion to frame Eret? He remembers that Quackity was the one that orchestrated that and let him die. So Carl pulls Sapnap aside and is like, I don't know who this guy is, but I do remember that he let me die one time. He took one of my canon lives. And so the two of them confront him and basically tell him to get the hell out of Kinoko Kingdom. Quackity is miffed and decides that he is going to start Las Nevadas once and for all, his new country. Something quick about Las Nevadas is that it is a desert built in a, Something quick about Las Nevadas is that it is a desert built in a taiga biome, I believe, so it snows there. It is manually a bunch of sand blocks placed on top of a snowy biome, so it snows in Las Nevadas. And the symbolism of this is so crazy that I have to talk about it right now, because it snows in Las Nevadas means that you can never escape who you are underneath, just like Quackity will never escape who he was when he first joined the server, being George's running mate, being who he was, and now he's trying to be something that he's not. He's trying to be a businessman and a country runner, and that's just not who he is. And so there's always going to be some of the old self in the new self, which is a little bit crazy for Dream SMP, I'll be honest. So Tommy actually ends up going to that bunker that Dream had from the disc finale. You'll remember that was the one that he took down Tommy and Tubbo into, and he had all of those possessions. So Tommy and Rambo visit it to find not only Friend, but to look and see if Tommy's old cow Henry is in there. And Tommy is very attached to Henry, and he thought that Henry was dead, but he was in Dream's vault, so he's kind of clinging on to hope that Dream used the revival book to bring him back. So Rambo and Tommy find Friend and they find Henry, and they end up pulling both of them out of the vault. It takes a long time, but on the way back to Tommy's house, he accidentally pulls too hard on Henry's leash, and Henry dies again. So Tommy is distraught and clings even more onto this idea of killing Dream for this wrong that he's been caused and all of these wrongs that he's been caused, which have all stemmed from Dream. Tommy ends up preparing Tubbo and Rambo some more for this inevitable prison break that Tommy's planning because he wants to break into the prison and kill Dream rather than breaking him out. Tommy also starts doing some kind of self-exposure therapy, visiting a lot of old locations like the final control room and the prison itself, and it's tough for him, but he's trying to expose himself to these things so that he doesn't freak out when he's in the prison and be unable to complete his mission of killing Dream. So finally, the day has come where Tommy, Tubbo, and Rambo are going to break into the prison and get Dream. So they together take Ghostbur into the prison under the guise that Ghostbur is going to be the one visiting Dream, and Tommy is bringing Friend on a lead because Ghostbur will be upset if Friend isn't there, and Tommy drinks an invisibility potion, leaves Friend outside the prison, and follows Ghostbur in, and there are all of these like defense mechanisms inside the prison. You have to be screened for a lot of stuff, so that's why they can't just go in and kill Dream. So after they're screened for all of this, Tommy is following behind Ghostbur invisible when Ghostbur gets on the bridge to cross the pit of lava that leads to Dream's cell, when Sam figures out that Tommy is invisible behind Ghostbur. So Sam is very angry, and Ghostbur is still heading across the pit. Tommy is like being restrained by Sam. He's losing it. He's like, let me go, and Ghostbur, oh my god, is still going because it's a moving bridge, so he can only move forward or he'll fall into the lava and die. And Ghostbur finally ends up all the way across the lava pit, standing just outside of Dream's cell, helpless and in danger because Dream is right there. So Tommy is back on the other shore, losing his mind, and Ghostbur is freaking out, and Tommy calls across the lava pit to Ghostbur and tells him to count down from 10, which is a common coping mechanism that we've seen Tommy use in the past, and it's actually a callback to the duel where Wilbur counted up to 10, and so he's counting down from something that led to his second canon death, and it's just, it's crazy, do you understand? It's his mind, it's wild. So he's telling Ghostbur to count down from 10 and that everything is going to be okay. Ghostbur's freaking out, he wants to know where Friend is, and then Dream pulls out a sword and executes Ghostbur. Ghostbur is dead. Wilbur Soot logs out of the game, and then he logs back in. That's right. You knew it was coming. Boom. Wilbur Soot is back, baby. He shows back up in the place where he died, standing in the L'Manberg crater, which has now been covered over with glass, so he's standing in the middle of this glass expanse. Tommy rushes out of the prison, regroups with Tubbo and Rambo, and grabs Friend, and they all go to see Wilbur, and he is just standing there looking completely different. His hair is brown now, he has a white streak in his hair, which, by the way, I have a white streak in my hair because Wilbur likes to say that Wilbur has a white streak in his hair because of stress. That's not true, it's because he got revived. And Tommy also got revived and came back to life, so he has a white streak in his hair, okay? I'm not budging on that. But anyways, Wilbur has this white streak in his hair. He's wearing this brown coat that's reminiscent of the one he had on during Pogtopia, but a little bit different. And he has a bandage on over his arm where something that looks like blood is leaking out of it. And he is eerily calm for what's just happened to him. Wilbur is here, and he greets Tommy, Tubbo, and Rambo, and sounds very happy to be alive after being in limbo, the afterlife, for 13 years. He goes on to describe what his limbo was like. So if you'll remember, Tommy's was a completely black void. He couldn't see anyone. He could speak to them, but he couldn't see them. And Wilbur's limbo was a train station, which, if you're any kind of Wilbur Soot fan, you will recognize from his self-released album, Your City Gave Me Asthma, which has a cover of a train station, and this is what Wilbur's limbo is often depicted as. So Wilbur says his limbo was a train station, a subway station, where he waited for 13 years because, again, time passes differently in limbo, and he waited, and trains would come and he would get on, but they would take him right back to the same place, and he would claw and scratch at the walls and lick them for some kind of moisture, but nothing ever happened, and he was just there suffering for 13 years. So honestly, I understand why he's like that, because if that happened to me, I would be exactly like that too, so I understand. Wilbur is also very dismissive towards Friend, and Tommy tries to be like, look, it's Friend, don't you care? And Wilbur is like, what is that thing? So it's clear that he's very different from Ghostbur. And Wilbur basically says that he's incredibly grateful to Dream for reviving him, and that Dream is his hero and his savior. So things are not looking too good, and that is the end of Season 3. Welcome to Interlude 3. This one's entitled Things I Forgot But Still Want to Mention, and so I'm throwing them in the middle of the video where they belong. If you can hear my friend playing Baldur's Gate 3 in the background, please don't listen. So first of all, I never got to mention this during the video, but Wilbur's canonical mother is a fridge, a Samsung smart fridge to be exact. Wilbur, the actual guy, canonized this on one of Phil's streams, and it's canon now and we can't stop it. However, I believe that later on, this is one of those things that was fanon originally and then got canonized, but a lot of people were like, well, what if he just saw a picture of his real mom, who, by the way, is the goddess of death, it's a long story, on the fridge, and then he thought that the fridge was his mom. And that actually got canonized, which is kind of funny and kind of cool at the same time. And shout out to Wilbur family lore, really, really fun stuff. I also want to take a moment here to mention Tales from the SMP, which was Carl Jacobs' thing that he was doing on the side. So I didn't get to mention C. Carl a lot during the video, but I did tease at the fact that he is a time traveler and actually has some really cool storylines. So his whole thing is that he, I believe, involuntarily time travels, and then it's causing him to lose his memory. So he's writing down all of these stories in books and then keeping them in his house so that he remembers them and remembers what's been happening to him, but also so that other people can maybe read them eventually. And this is causing severe damage to his relationships. But then we have Tales from the SMP, which is a side series that Carl Jacobs did of C. Carl traveling to all of these different time periods in the past and in the future, and kind of getting to see ancestors of the current Dream SMP characters, which is really cool, or even like their great however many great-grandchildren's, which is pretty cool as well. Some of them were pretty memorable. I think at least one of them was a murder mystery. Maybe two of them were murder mysteries. There was a murder mystery in a mansion, which was pretty fun, and like more people got killed off as time went on, and that was really cool. The one in the future took place in a city with one character who was Rambu's descendant, who was archiving all of the history of the Dream SMP, and we got to hear a lot about these previous residents of the city who were implied to be descendants of the Dream SMP characters, and as a side note, C. Tommy did not have a descendant there, which is sad and made a lot of people really crazy at the time about what was going to happen to him, but it's, you know, it was a cool story. Another really memorable one was the time that Carl went to a, like, Salem witch trials village, I think. That one was fun. Corpse Husband was there, so it was really cool. Carl Jacobs in general, I think, is doing more with this idea now. I think he's actually got, like, a comic book going on with, like, a similar premise. So, I don't know what's going on with him, but I think it's kind of cool that Dream SMP has sort of, in spirit, been able to go a little mainstream. I also want to mention that, in my opinion, Dream SMP was sort of, if you don't mind my saying, a revolutionary form of storytelling. I already have a video kind of about this on my channel, but I don't think we will ever have something like Dream SMP ever again, just due to its sheer scale, and also the way that it happened, the time period it was happening in, the cultural context around it. I don't think there will ever be another media that puts the creators so close to the fan base, for better or for worse, but this means that, again, a lot of fan content influenced the actual story. And in general, I think that the live format of it really changed a lot about the story. So much of, like, just what happened was improv or just something that was come up with on the fly, and there are things that changed the entire story that probably weren't originally planned. The Dream SMP itself wasn't even originally planned. Nobody went into it knowing that they were going to make a story that people were going to be captivated by or would care about. Everyone was just having a little fun on a Minecraft server. In line with that, another thing I want to mention about audience interaction is that there's this pretty cool sort of semi-canon mechanic about the Dream SMP characters and their chats. So, Technoblade, the character, has these voices in his head, which all are like blood for the blood god, and they're like encouraging him to like murder people and stuff, and that is canonically his chat talking to him, which is really awesome, actually. That's so cool and creative. And then eventually a lot of other streamers started to do this as well. So Nikki, her chat is her diary. For Phil, he has a flock of crows that follow him around and bring him things, which are like stream donations and stuff, which that's kind of cute. And for Tommy, I think his chat is canonically a Nokia phone that just lights up with text messages in his pockets the entire time while he's doing stuff. And I love that for him. It's so sweet, Tommy. I love it so much. And that brings me to another sort of thing which is interesting that I just want to mention, which is kind of a personal theory, but when Wilbur is asking C. Phil to kill him, he says, "Look at them, they all want you to," when gesturing to the crowd. And this could be a thing about just him thinking that everyone hates him, but personally I like to think that Wilbur also has these sort of like voices, I suppose, where he is aware of the chat and they're speaking to him, and that's why he wants to press the button so bad, because everyone in his chat would be like, "Wilbur, press the button, Wilbur, blow up a Manberg." And so I think it's kind of cool to me, in my opinion, and I don't think it takes away from the storyline at all. And I just kind of like the idea that, like, the chat is canon and they follow the characters around and are generally annoying, so that's pretty fun to me. I also want to mention, along the lines of Dream SMP being mainly improv, I do want to take a moment to talk about the fact that people kind of got upset when the streams started to get more scripted. There were a lot of debates on my Twitter timeline, I remember, about people saying, "Oh, improv lore was better," or "No, they're planning things out and so it's a better storyline, but it doesn't matter because it's not improv," yada yada yada. So there is definitely a divide between people when it comes to that. So if for some godforsaken reason this video makes you decide to go watch all of Dream SMP, just keep in mind that eventually there's a change where things stop being mostly improv and kind of get a little more scripted, which is fine, in my opinion. I can't really tell the difference. Well, you can a little bit towards the end, but originally it was all improv, and then there started to be guidelines because they realized that they were trying to tell a story. And I don't think that's necessarily bad, but it is something to keep in mind. Another thing I want to mention is the kind of impermanent nature of Dream SMP streams and VODs. So while I was doing research for this video, I found the VOD where Carl, Sapnap, and Quackity all get engaged to each other, and while I was looking into it, I saw in the description the person who published it said that the VOD used to be lost media, so that actually turns out to be the case with a lot of the, like, less important Dream SMP VODs. Some of them have just been lost to time unless someone downloaded them off of their computer, because Twitch VODs only stay on the streamer's channel for either 30 or 60 days, and after that, they're gone. So unless you have a dedicated VOD re-upload channel or some fan who's really into re-uploading your streams on YouTube, some of those streams might be gone forever. And this means that some of the Dream SMP lore is gone forever. There are hints and details about lore that could have been dropped in one random runoff stream that nobody saved or one person saved and didn't publish, and now it's gone, lost to time forever. The Dream SMP obviously isn't like a typical TV show or book where you can just go back and find something if you're curious about where it came from. You might remember around what time your favorite character in a book did this or said that, but if you want to remember one specific moment in the Dream SMP, first you have to remember what arc it was happening during, and then you have to remember whose channel it was streamed on and when, and then you have to look through the 2, 3, 4 hour VOD to find the specific moment that you want, and it just kind of gets to be a lot, especially if you don't have that sort of time on your hands. I think that's part of why not a lot of people make videos like this, where they try to recap all of the Dream SMP, especially not if they want a completely factual sort of retelling, because it would be impossible. It would be a Herculean task to watch through all of those VODs, catalog everything that is canon, and then tell it to a camera. It's just not feasible. Fortunately, I do want to give a quick shout out to the Dream SMP wiki, who has a team of dedicated people who have been cataloging all of this stuff since 2020. They were my main resource during this project, and I found a ton of streams, a ton of clips, and a ton of evidence for all of the things that I was writing on the Dream Team wiki. So shout out to them, and shout out to anyone doing archival or working on lost media stuff in general. You guys are awesome. That's definitely something that I've always been passionate about, and I think for the Dream SMP and for a story this big that meant so much to a lot of people, it's definitely very important. And that's just something I wanted to say. If you have a stream on your computer from decades ago that maybe someone might not have uploaded, I don't know, try and do it yourself. It would be cool. During this interlude, I also want to take a moment to mention Technoblade, the real guy, who unfortunately sadly passed away in 2022. Now, I was never a big Technoblade watcher or a fan of his, but I was subscribed to his channel and I enjoyed seeing him on the Dream SMP, and when he passed away, it hit me really hard because, you know, even though I didn't watch him, he was so young and it was difficult to see something like that happen in front of your eyes. I think especially it's such a strange dynamic with fans watching a creator that they cared about but didn't know personally pass away like that. And I just want to mention in this video that Technoblade was incredible at writing and had some wonderful content and videos, and I know that he's done a lot and helped a lot of people, so thank you, Technoblade. I also think that his character in the Dream SMP is worth noting for sort of the way that he's kept his memory alive. People still to this day are drawing fan art of and talking about his character and how much work was put into him and how much Technoblade, the actual guy, cared about the lore and did all that he could with what he could, especially in the later months of the Dream SMP, and even when it might not have been like very easy for him to stream. It's admirable, and the commitment to a story is amazing. And so I just want to mention that and say, if you're still out there drawing fan art of C Technoblade in the year 2023 or 2024 or whenever the hell this video comes out, thank you. It's wonderful, and I think in general, fan creation and stuff like that is a great way to honor someone, especially someone who cared so much about that character. So I don't have a lot to say, but I thought it would be prudent to mention during this video because he was such a huge part of the lore and part of Dream SMP. So that's all I have to say for this interlude, and now on to Season 4 of the Dream SMP. Alright, so now it's time for Season 4, and like I said at the beginning of the video, I have to come clean and say this is kind of where I stopped watching, and also the lore started to kind of taper off a little bit. Nobody really wanted to do lore anymore because everyone had their own side projects, and I suppose nobody really knew how to end the story. Dream SMP took off and nobody was expecting it to happen, so it's not like they had a whole plot written out or anything of that nature, so everyone was just kind of confused and didn't really stream anymore, but I will do my best to speedrun what I know of Season 4. So Fundy is having issues with his sleep. He can't sleep for like a week straight. He hasn't been able to sleep, and he ends up meeting up with Phil, his grandfather, and they both talk about the fact that Wilbur is back, and Fundy did not know until Phil tells him, and he loses his mind, and then they go around visiting some old locations around the server, and Fundy ends up mentioning the letters to Phil, and Phil reveals that actually Wilbur had lied in the letters because Fundy brings up Schlatt, and Phil is like, who is that? And Phil's like, Wilbur told me that he won that election and that things were going great. So Wilbur was lying in the letters to his father. He wanted Phil to think that he was doing awesome and that he could be proud of him, but it just wasn't true. And I have evidence to this because there's this point in the Manberg v. Poctopia arc where Wilbur pauses and says, I hope that Phil would be proud of me. That's crazy. That's actually crazy. Wilbur also shows up at Las Nevadas, Quackity's country, and decides that he is going to compete with Quackity, and it's a whole thing. Wilbur also brings Tommy along, and the two of them are basically vying for Tommy's attention and trying to get him on their side. And Wilbur plays the family card because the two of them, they're like brothers, you and I. And so Wilbur plays the family card and is like, you know what's thicker than business and competition, Tommy? You know what's like more important than that? Family, blood. Please stay with me. Which is so crazy. Like, I don't know if I've gotten it across enough in this like video essay, but Tommy like idolizes Wilbur. It's very clear that the two of them were kind of like, Tommy was the only person that Wilbur had for a while, and Wilbur was the only person that Tommy had. There's actually a part during Exile where Ghostbur says that he named Tommy, which is so wild, and it's implied that they've known each other for a very, very long time. And so Tommy will basically do anything that Wilbur tells him to if he sounds convincing enough, and it doesn't help that Wilbur's already pretty charismatic, so Wilbur is like, oh, join my rival business to Quackity's business, and Tommy is like, okay, Wilbur, whatever you say, and so they start a rival business, and Quackity is understandably a little miffed by it. Also, Wilbur Soot posted on AO3, so part of the Dream SMP canon is posted in script form on Archive of Our Own, the fanfiction website, because, again, lore was tapering off, nobody was getting together to do it on the server, and so Wilbur, the guy, ended up just posting it on AO3, so Wilbur Soot has an AO3 account where he posted canon Dream SMP lore. So that's fun. I don't know what happens in it, but I heard good things. It's called Hitting on 16, if you want to read it. I believe it's now called something different, but I'm not sure, don't quote me on that. At one point, Purpled, who isn't on here, and I mentioned briefly as someone Quackity had recruited to Las Nevadas, ends up turning on Quackity and pushes Slime Skull into lava, and he melts and presumably dies. It's not certain how slime biology works, but he like freezes and doesn't talk to anyone. And at some point, Slime also pushes Quackity off of a balcony. I don't know the context for that, but Quackity does lose another canon life after that happens. There's also a part where Wilbur decides that he needs to talk to his son because he's been gone for like 5 months, and they end up chatting, and Fundy, in his desperation to get out of this conversation with Wilbur because it's going terribly, jumps off of a bridge and takes his second canon life just so that he can get out of a conversation with his father, which is wild. So Fundy loses another canon life. So the part of Season 4 lore that I really do know is kind of the part that's the end of Wilbur's story. So the first stream that Wilbur has as part of his ending is called Inconsolable Differences, and this is a stream where Tommy takes Wilbur to Logstedshire to visit where he was exiled to and kind of shows Wilbur around, and the two of them end up coming to a stop and staring up at the tower where Tommy had planned to jump off, and Wilbur is like, what is this? And Tommy goes, well, this is where, like, I had lost all hope, and this is where I went to kill myself. And Wilbur fucking blacks out and has a vision of him going to the prison cell where Dream is held, breaking in and killing him over and over and over and over again. And the whole time he's screaming at him and just raging and losing his mind. And then he comes to, and Tommy's like, hey man, are you all right? And Wilbur's like, huh? Yeah, I'm all right. Hey, I have an idea. So Wilbur has a plan, and he basically tells Tommy, hey, you're just gonna have to trust me on this one. And Tommy is like, well, what's the plan? And Wilbur's like, we're gonna go to the prison. And Tommy's like, I do not want to go there. I do not want to see Dream. I would really like to not see Dream, please. And Wilbur's like, no, Tommy, just trust me, okay? He will not even come near you. Just listen to me. I promise you this. And Tommy, because it's Wilbur, agrees to the plan. And before we get into that, there is a wonderful scene of these two dancing on the beach where Tommy was going to have his beach party that never happened because nobody showed up, and the two of them are dancing to music on the shore and singing along to the music, and it's so amazing, and it is for like 5 seconds in this story full of violence and just terrible things happening to these characters over and over again. It is a moment of lightness and levity that is so rare, and I love that scene. It might be my favorite scene in all of Dream SMP. Even though I wasn't watching it Before they execute this plan, Wilbur has Tommy give him the discs, and basically as a show of trust, he's like, Tommy, you just have to trust me on this, and I swear that the outcome of this will be good for you. So Wilbur decides that they're going to execute this plan, so he takes Tommy to the prison. Dream, for some reason, is allowed, like, free reign of the prison now. I must have missed that part of the lore, but anyways, they show up to the prison, and Tommy and Wilbur both pull up to the lobby, and Dream shows up, and Tommy gets in front of Wilbur with his shield up, and he's like, stay behind me, Wilbur, and it's crazy. And then Wilbur's like, Tommy, don't worry about this. I've got this. And so Wilbur hands Dream a book and quill and says, I want you to write something. And Dream is like, what on earth are you blabbering about? And so Wilbur towers up a few blocks, and he says, I have 3 lava buckets in my inventory. And he shows them all to Dream, and he's like, if you do not write exactly what I tell you to with no mistakes in that book, then I am going to light myself on fire and kill myself in front of you. What is wrong with this guy? So Dream is like flabbergasted, and Tommy is losing his mind because he might not like Wilbur that much now that he's back, but he cannot lose him again. So he's like, Wilbur, what are you thinking? And Wilbur's like, Tommy, shut the fuck up and stay behind me. Oh my god, dude. And so Wilbur is starting to light himself on fire, and Dream is like, okay, I'll write it, because Wilbur has figured out that Dream has seen Wilbur as like a little pet project, and he needs Wilbur alive to continue like researching what's going on with revival and stuff. And so Wilbur stands lava bucket at the ready to kill himself while he tells Dream what to write. So he says, I want you to write that L'Manberg was always a sovereign nation, and Wilbur Soot is a legitimate leader of that country. And Dream is like, okay. And Wilbur's like, you better do it or I'm killing myself. And then Dream is like, okay, I will. Wilbur also has him write some stuff about Tommy and states that the discs belong to Tommy, stuff like that. And generally, it's just a lot of things that Dream ideologically, on principle, disagrees with. This whole time, by the way, Tommy is losing his mind because he's like, Wilbur, please don't light yourself on fire. And then Wilbur asks Dream to write down that, like, he's not going to bother Tommy anymore or something like that. So then Dream writes all of that down, and he's like, you know that me writing all this down means nothing, right? And Wilbur's like, I don't care, give me the book. So he signs the book, and he gives it back to Wilbur. And then Wilbur pulls out Tommy's discs and gives them both to Dream, and then he says, Dream, you are going to burn these discs in this lava bucket that I'm giving you right now, and you have 20 seconds to burn them, or I am going to kill myself. So Tommy obviously loses his mind. He is screaming at Wilbur, asking what's wrong with him, why he's doing this, and Dream is like, oh, you won't kill yourself, you won't do it, and Wilbur's like, try me, watch me, and then he lights himself on fire for a second, and then Dream freaks out, and Wilbur counts down from 20, and he's like, you have 20 seconds, or I'm going to kill myself, and he gets down to 1, and then Dream throws the discs in the lava, and they are burnt and gone. And Wilbur's like, all right, that's all I wanted. See you later. So Wilbur leads Tommy out of the prison. Tommy is losing his mind because these are his most treasured possessions. His memories of Tubbo, his memories of everything that he's been through to get them. And Wilbur just threw them away like that to his greatest enemy. So he's screaming at Wilbur, asking him why he did that. He sounds like he's in tears. And then they go into the Nether, and Wilbur is heading back to the portal to L'Manberg, and Tommy says, don't you fucking come near me, don't talk to me. And then about 5 seconds later, he gets lost in the Nether and asks Wilbur in this really small, dejected sounding voice, where are you? Because he will always follow Wilbur no matter what happens, because, do you understand? Do you understand? He'll follow him anywhere, no matter what happened. He's just gonna keep following him around. So, Wilbur brings Tommy back to L'Manberg. Wilbur is still eerily silent about all of this. Tommy is still yelling at his back and asking what the hell is wrong with him. And then Wilbur makes it to the community house, which, by the way, has been repaired. And Wilbur places down an ender chest, reaches into it, and says, here, Tommy, these are your discs. And he hands Tommy his discs, the real ones. The ones that he had Dream burn were fake. That's okay. So Tommy, like, immediately is stunned, speechless. Wilbur says, "Thank you for trusting me," and then, like, disappears. And it is worthy of noting that when they were in the Nether, Tommy said something to the effect of, "Every time something happens to me, you turn around and make it about you." The second and final See Wilbur stream is called Boundless Sands, and it is the end of Wilbur's apology tour, where he went around and apologized to a ton of people, including Filza, Nikki, which devastating apology. I believe he also apologized to Fundy, but again, that didn't go so well because Fundy jumped off a bridge in order to stop talking to him. But he did his best, and Wilbur finally goes to apologize to Quackity, who this whole time he's had this weird, like, rivalry with, and after he goes to Las Nevadas, he finds that Quackity is not there, and so he drags Tommy away and kind of starts preparing to leave. We don't know this yet, Tommy doesn't know this yet, but this is Wilbur's finale. So the stream actually opens with a flashback to L'Manberg days, and it's really cinematic and stuff. It's actually really cool, and it's just Wilbur and Tommy goofing around at the beginning of L'Manberg, and Wilbur tells Tommy that, like, L'Manberg did not mean anything to him until Tommy gave it a name. And Wilbur says, "To me, L'Manberg is you. To me, it's you." When Wilbur said all that stuff about fighting to protect L'Manberg, he was talking about Tommy the whole time because L'Manberg is Tommy. Do you understand? They're the same thing. They're the same thing. Okay, listen. Wilbur, listen. Wilbur's whole thing about L'Manberg and what the country means to him this whole time has been about Tommy. It's been about the fact that he feels incapable as a brother figure to Tommy. I said it, they are brothers. Wilbur feels incapable because he was not in control of L'Manberg and he was not providing a good example, and he wanted Tommy to look up to him. And do you understand? They're the same thing. To me, it's you. Do you understand? And then Wilbur, in this flashback, Wilbur tells Tommy that he's really proud of what they're doing here, and he truly believes in their mission. Do you get it? Okay. Wilbur is leaving. He takes Tommy to this beach, and he starts insinuating all this stuff, and he's like, "I have to go now, Tommy." And Tommy's like, "What are you talking about? You just got back, like, a year ago, and I'm sure in Dream SMP time it's been like a month or so." And he's like, "You can't leave. I just got you back." And Wilbur tells him that he doesn't know what to tell him, and he has to leave. This is the end for him. And Tommy, in this really kind of sad voice, goes, "Wilbur, are you going to kill yourself?" And Wilbur goes, "I didn't say that." Okay. Now get ready, because it gets better. Wilbur is telling Tommy that he's leaving, and he can't explain it because it would just hurt and confuse Tommy even more. And Tommy is losing his mind because this is one of the last people he has left. He has not seen Tubbo in months. He doesn't talk to anyone anymore. Wilbur is one of the last people he has remaining in his life, and Wilbur is leaving Tommy astray. He's been following Wilbur around for God knows how long, and Wilbur is leaving. Tommy gets so upset at Wilbur, and at this point it is raining out and it's getting darker, and Tommy gets so upset with Wilbur that he pulls out a sword and starts to attack him, and Wilbur says, Tommy, stop, I'll explain." And Tommy pauses and says, "I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me. I didn't used to be this angry." Are you fucking kidding me, man? So, Wilbur explains, now buckle in. Do you remember how L'Manberg was about being European and everyone else was American? So Wilbur reveals that he was born in Utah in the United States of America, and he was raised for the first 16 years of his life. He was raised in a gas station by Phil's on Minecraft, and he worked in the gas station, and I'm not making any of this shit up. This is real. And he tells Tommy that he is going back to Utah to be where he belongs. What? And Tommy is obviously flabbergasted, and he's like, you are lying to me right now. And Wilbur's like, do you remember when I first showed up on this server and I was wearing that orange jacket? Which he did have an orange jacket on his skin, by the way. He goes, that was the uniform of the gas station I worked at. It all comes full circle, guys. Wilbur is American. Can you believe that? But then, Wilbur starts talking to Tommy about how he came here and he was a sailor when he lived in Utah. And he sailed out one day during a storm and he ended up here in the Dream SMP. And he specifically says to Tommy, I found you again. Implying that they knew each other beforehand, implying that SMP Earth, another SMP, is canon, and that they have known each other for much longer than the Dream SMP, which makes me crazy. And what is the timeline here? What is going on? What is going on? Does any of this make any sense? No. But Wilbur met him again. Do you understand? He says, I met you again, and we created something together, and it was wonderful. The Dream SMP is a story about love, and I hope that you understand through all of this that this is the crux of all of it. The Dream SMP happened because this guy from Utah cared about this guy that he met in another realm and then found again. That is crazy. Sorry, I'm losing it a little. I love Dream SMP. I am shaking. But Tommy is so upset that Wilbur is leaving and is begging him to stay, trying anything he can to convince Wilbur not to leave. And then eventually he says, you know, Wilbur, you've done all of this apologizing and you've never apologized to me. And why is that? And Wilbur tells him that when he talked to Philza about going around and apologizing to everyone, Philza told him that people, when you apologize to them, can either accept your apology and choose to keep you in their life, or they can choose not to accept your apology and remove you from their life. And that's up to them, because you're the one that wronged them. And Wilbur tells Tommy that he never apologized because he was afraid to lose Tommy, when we know good and fucking well that Tommy would have forgiven him immediately. Immediately. Okay? Immediately. So Tommy says, you know, Wilbur, you've done all of this apologizing, and I think you forget that the one person you need to really apologize to is yourself. And Wilbur climbs in a boat and starts sailing out in the middle of this storm out into the ocean. But before he goes, he says, Tommy, I've been doing all of this writing for a long, long time, since I've been president of L'Manberg. And before I go, I want you to have this. And he hands a book to Tommy. I believe it's entitled President Soot. And Tommy spends a long time reading it. And to this day, we have no idea what the book said. The contents have never been revealed. But Tommy reads it, and then Wilbur says, you mean the world to me, bro. I mean it. Gets in the boat and starts sailing off of the coast to Utah, which is a landlocked state, by the way. And Wilbur gets about halfway off the coast, turns around in the boat and says, and Tommy, before I forget. And the last words he says to Tommy are, don't trust those Americans. And then he sails out into the storm, and delighted, he screams and cries and says, I'm going home, I'm going home, and then logs off the server. Our point of view cuts to Tommy, and you see on his face cam, after he's been laughing along with Wilbur and saying goodbye, the minute Wilbur leaves the server, Tommy breaks down in tears. You might be able to see this picture. So Wilbur Soot filmed a live-action segment where he dressed up as his Minecraft OC in the deserts of Utah, which, by the way, is a landlocked country. You cannot sail to Utah. Appears and then walks off screen for good. We also get a little snippet of the Ozymandias poem, and Wilbur recites it and says, "My name is Wilbur Soot, King of Kings," recites the poem, and ends it with, "But I never did really forgive myself." And that's essentially the end of Wilbur's story, but before we go, we get one last little thing. We get a short animation of Limbo, where, by the way, I forgot to mention this, but Wilbur and Ghostbur cannot exist in the same plane at the same time. So when Wilbur came back, Ghostbur got sent to Limbo. So he's been suffering down there for quite some time, and we get a short little animation of who but Friend appearing in Limbo and buying at Ghostbur, and Ghostbur goes, "Friend?" And so now they've been reunited together in Limbo, and that is the only happy ending in Dream SMP. The Dream SMP ending is something that I do not really want to talk about because it has a lot of negative connotations given the plot of the whole story, and there is still speculation to this day that it was not the originally intended ending of the server, and I really don't want to get into all of that. What I will tell you is that the canon ending involves Tubbo's nuke project that he was working on, and Tubbo and Tommy get together and decide that they're going to use the nuke to blow up Dream, or something to that effect. And then the nuke comes and blows everyone up, killing all of them. And then they respawn in a new world, and Dream asks Tommy if he wants to be friends and build a base together, and Tommy accepts. Before they die, by the way, Tommy apologizes to Dream. Can you imagine that? So I really don't want to talk about it. To me, that ending is not canon. I don't even like to think about it. It feels wrong for the story that spent so much build-up about Tommy's character being like special to people and special to me, and I do not like that ending at all. And if you have gotten attached to this story over the course of this video and you also don't like that ending, I will tell you that I have heard whispers that it's kind of implied in Tommy, the actual guy, in his new SMP, Together SMP, it's implied that C Tubbo and C Tommy are like off there living their best lives and hopefully having the Dream SMP ending retconned, and they're actually happy in another SMP. I've also heard people talking about C Wilbur being on the Q SMP and some other characters migrating elsewhere, and me personally, I just like to pretend that my favorite characters had a happy ending because the real Dream SMP ending is dog shit, alright? I really don't want to talk about it. There are thousands of video essays about how it sucks or how it's incredible if you want to go watch those and form your own opinion, but me personally, I don't really want to talk about it. And if that is an anticlimactic ending for you, I'm sorry, but it was for me too. So I didn't really like it. I like to pretend that everything is fine. And for me, the Dream SMP kind of ends at the disc finale. In my opinion, it would have been best if it ended there for good, with Dream in prison and Tommy having his discs back, and the potential for a Wilbur revival on the horizon. But it didn't end there, and I don't blame the writing of the Dream SMP because I think nobody could have predicted that it would get this big and have this expansive of a story, and I understand if they didn't know how to end it properly or with a satisfying ending, but I do not think that the one that we were given was good in any respect. So that is the end of Season 4 of the Dream SMP. Thank you. 2020 is a year that many people look back on with regret, and for some, that includes looking back on Dream SMP with regret and cringe and a sense of, why did any of us ever care about that stupid Minecraft roleplay? It was never that serious, right? What were all of us doing, getting upset about and consuming content about and making fan art of a stupid Minecraft server with stupid Twitch streamers who nobody cares about anymore? Most people call 2020 their Dream SMP phase, deriding it and talking about their old L'Manberg flags stuffed in the back of their closet and their cringy "Your Tommy, Your Tubbo" compasses that they wanted so bad to share with their best friend. People talk about how ridiculous it was. And maybe they're right. Dream SMP was important to me when I was a teenager, but now I'm older and there's a lot of flaws with the story that I maybe didn't want to know about at the time. And for some people, Dream SMP was nothing. It was a flash in the pan, something that got popular when it shouldn't have. No media is perfect, but Dream SMP certainly was not. And why did anyone care about it anyways? Even talking about Dream SMP sometimes these days will get an immediate negative reaction out of people when they remember that time period of their life and think that you're stupid or cringe for even talking about it. So who in 2023 still cares about Dream SMP? Who cares to know what happened? Who in their right mind would make an hours-long YouTube video about the story and the plotline and the characters that are still dear to many people to this day? That would be stupid, right? Dream SMP is stupid.
All right. Good video.
It's a wrap.
That's a wrap. I'm going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So, Dream SMP was really important to me. I hope I've made that clear enough in this video and evidence that even with its creation. Dream SMP is a story that was important to a lot of people, not just me, and I still really, really cherish it to this day and look back on it as something that made my life better during quarantine and during a time when things could have been really bad. I really appreciate all of the work that went into it, even if it wasn't a perfect storyline, even if it was never meant to be a story in the first place. I think that it was amazing for what it was. And it might not be perfect, it might not even be a story, it might be stupid to you, or you might not understand why people think it's worth talking about, even to this day. You might not get why people treat it so dramatically or like it was this life-changing piece of media, but I hope that this video helped you understand a little bit more why it's so important to so many people. This retelling is how I remember the Dream SMP. I remember it fondly as this piece of media that me and my friends gathered around and I met so many people because of. It was fun to talk about the lore and the characters, and it was mind-blowing to be part of something so huge and feel like every new day was going to bring something new in the lore and story that was going to change your life, maybe. It was beautiful. It's like an old story or a fairy tale that I'm going to remember forever, even if I never watch all the thousands of hours of content or VODs ever again, which, let's be honest, I probably never will. I was joking to my friends that making this video is sort of like starting an oral tradition, because who else is going to watch all of Dream SMP after it's been completed? Dream SMP to me, as I've gotten new friends and learned more how to be myself and be honest about the things that I like, has become an oral tradition. It's something that I say, hey, I used to really care about this. Do you want to hear about all of the lore? And sometimes my friends say yes, and I get to sit down with them and talk with them about Dream SMP for 3 hours. People here who have never watched a single minute of content now understand Dream SMP the way I do because I told them about it, and they start to get it. They start to understand what makes it so special, and I hope that this video could have done that for at least some of you if you didn't like the Dream SMP before. I mentioned this earlier, but I cried while writing this script. I was overwhelmed by how much I cared about Tommy and how much I cared about this story in general, and how much it meant to me. I hope that this video could provide even a sliver of how much I care about this story and how much love I know was put into it and made from it. I know that the entire fandom was obsessed with this story, and people still are to this day. Don't get me wrong, the Dream SMP fandom is not dead. People still post about it on Tumblr. I still follow several of them. People still tweet about it and write deep theories and meta about it. It's still a thriving thing, even if it's kind of dead, if it's over. fandom continues on. That's the nature of fandoms. And that's kind of what makes Dream SMP so beautiful to me, is that so many people care. I cared. I cried about this story so many times while the Dream SMP was happening, and now, even years later, it can provoke something in me and make the waterworks start flowing all over again. And if that's not the mark of an important, poignant story that means a lot to a lot of people, with characters who people deeply connected with and care about, and storylines that are still held dearly to this day, then I don't know what is. Dream SMP changed my life. It got me back into writing for fun, something that I had kind of stopped doing, and now I've done pretty much every day for the past 3 or so years. It's helped me through a lot of stuff, and it's helped me understand a lot of things about myself. See Tommy as a main character was easy for me to connect with because he's such a teenager, and I was his same age when I was watching the Dream SMP. See Tommy's story is about not wanting to age out of being a kid, and it's also about trying to understand that the world around you isn't perfect, and the people around you aren't going to be perfect all of the time, and hell, you aren't going to be perfect all the time, and you can still make mistakes and cause messes, and at the end of the day, there will still be people who care about you and want to see you work through it. The Dream SMP is about love. On a story level, on a meta level, and on a fandom level. The Dream SMP is about what happens when people care enough to make a story that people care about. I care about this story. Millions cared about this story when it was still going on, and people still do to this day. Otherwise, there wouldn't be like 1 billion people posting for November 16th saying happy anniversary of Wilbur's death day just like a few days ago. The love surrounding this story and inside of this story is kind of incredible to me. And I hope that this doesn't sound cheesy or sappy about a Minecraft roleplay, but it's more than that to me. It's incredible, and for so many people, it's just changed so much for the better. I mean, it's what created this channel. I am here and have a platform on YouTube because of the Dream SMP. In some part, I'm sure that it's gotten me where I am today and changed my mind about a lot of things. It let me meet friends who are halfway across the world, but was still able to bond with me over what was happening in the lore of the Dream SMP, and I remember fondly those nights that we spent staying up wondering what was going to happen next. It's a bit like gathering around a campfire and talking about stories and scary stories, ghost stories, whatever it is. It has a certain measure of camaraderie, and it encourages you to talk about it with other people because it's just so big that you want to hear from other people about it. It's social. It creates even more after it's already created a storyline. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but the Dream SMP is important to me. It's a story that I really love with characters that I really love, and I've never had an experience like it since. So, I hope this video was a little illuminating on any kind of feeling I have towards the Dream SMP, and I hope that maybe it made some of you understand a little better. Thank you for watching. Hi, Editing Carl here. So, a few days after I started editing this video, Tommy actually had a stream where he revisited the Dream SMP, touring around Technoblade's father in his memory, and at the end of that stream, there was something he said that was really poignant and relevant to kind of the point I make here at the end of the video, so I'm just going to include that here. Thank you for watching.
And please never, never feel ashamed that that was a part of your life and that that happened, because it's really cool. It's a really cool thing, and none of us meant for it to happen. And if you were into it, please don't. It was awesome. It was great. And I've been on the internet for 4 years. No, 6. How long? How old am I now? 19. Since I was 9, I've been watching Dan TDM, and I don't think that there's been that much that has had that much soul, that much love poured into it than the Dream SMP. And from what I know behind the scenes and all the people at that time, every one of us loved it so, so much. And it's done now. That time's over. That time's in the past. and it's not going to come back. But never be ashamed of it, because it's so cool. And I'm so honored to have been a part of it.